Hello, marketers. This is the Funnel Lab, and welcome to Funnel Lab Fridays. For those of you that don't know, Funnel Lab Fridays is a weekly LinkedIn live session where we dive into use cases and challenges for sort of data-savvy marketers and issues that they're facing. I'm your host, Eric Westerkamp, CEO of Caliber Mind, and joining me today are Doug Bell, who runs marketing here at Caliber Mind, and Ryan Milligan, VP of Sales and Revenue Operations at Quota Path. Today, Doug, Ryan, and I will be discussing sort of like North Star metrics for marketing and channel activation. Welcome, Doug and Ryan. Doug, welcome back. And Ryan, welcome to the show. And maybe you could tell us just, real quick, a little bit about yourself and about Quota Path.
Sure. Well, thank you both for having me. Really excited to be here. I'm Ryan Milligan. I lead the sales and revenue operations teams at Quota Path. Quota Path automates the process of calculating and paying your team's commissions. So making it really easy for your reps to see how much they're earning in real time in commissions, and for your finance and ops teams to build comp plans and pay your team. I was really excited for this conversation. My background is in data science, analytics, and performance marketing before moving into marketing operations and then rev ops, and then taking over our sales team. So I led display advertising for a long time at Wayfair.com, performance marketing at Homebase previously, and have shifted more into a rev ops capacity here at Quota Path, but manage all things data for the org as well. So thank you both very much for having me.
No, that's great. It's kind of a perfect fit for this morning's conversation. So start with the first question, Ryan. Activating sort of a marketing channel is kind of no easy lift, right? We've just activated 2 here in the last 12 months at Caliber Mind. And as hard as it is, the toughest question quite often is, like, how do we know that the channel is where we want it to be? Like, how is it performing? Is it performing, right? Maybe we could start today's conversation by understanding like some of your recent efforts to activate, a community channel for Quota Path.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you can imagine, from a commissions tracking and commissions advice perspective, ideas on proper compensation plans and comp plan design are one of the best kind of top of funnel lead generation tools for us. There's no class on how to design a perfect comp plan. And so we offer those services in the market as a top of funnel customer acquisition motion. And so communities are a place in which we really test that. So in communities such as RevOps Co-op, Pavilion, Modern Sales Pros, Women in Sales, what have you, we offer advice to the market to say, hey, grab 30 minutes with the Quota Path team. We'll help you design the best comp plan for your business entirely for free, with the thought that that is an MQL style event that leads to future long-term LTV, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we're thinking about going into a new community, for example, what we think through is, what are the steps in the process from joining a community and spending money in a community to revenue that are those intermediate steps, and giving time horizons to when we feel like we can achieve that step or not. So signing up for a new community, you're oftentimes signing an annual contract.
Mm-hmm.
And what you want to figure out is, in your first 90 days, can I generate enough of the first order metric, whether that's compensation plan consultations, MQLs, calculator downloads, whatever it is, to then say, if this metric holds true, if I'm generating 100 of these a month, 1,000 of these a month, what then would the to op conversion rate, and then to win rate, to ASP, to ARR, to LTV to CAC payback period, what would all that down funnel components have to be if this thing stays true? And once that's within the range that we're comfortable with and we've optimized to that, that buys me then another 90 days, right? So the example would be, first 90 days, I'm just trying to drive conversations with me and my team.
Yeah.
Compensation plan consults that I'm giving away for free.
Yeah.
Am I driving enough of that volume in the first 90 days to then signal that those could convert into opportunities? If yes, I've bought myself another 90 days to look at opportunity creation. And if no, I'm then really assessing, am I offering the right thing, or is this a place that I want to continue to invest?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Is the channel actually performing and working for you right there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Doug, maybe you could tell me a little bit about some of the metrics that we use to track success for performing marketing and how they eventually translated to sort of highly scalable channels and some of the channels that we actually have today.
Yeah. Well, first off, Ryan, I love the approach that you've taken at Quota Path. And I think that's the discussion we're going to have is sort of how do you understand those cascading impacts and buy time or sort of justify what's going to happen for the rest of the funnel. As Eric pointed out, we've activated two channels in the last year, ABX, which is its own conversation, and we've certainly brought up a number of times here. And the other is performance marketing. And maybe saying that we activated is a stretch. There was existing sort of superstructure around it, but it really wasn't performing in the ways that we wanted to. It was sort of very lead based. It was like, hey, can we gate content, be in paid social, and can we drive leads, if you will? And so as we were reactivating the channel, really what we had to do is to come up with a new model. And this is going to sort of explain the metrics I'm going to give you in a second. But effectively, the new model said, look, we're not driving towards this, say, mid or bottom of funnel result, leads, MQLs, whatever you want to call them. We have to start thinking about our ability to engage an audience in an economically feasible way. And so when we began to reactivate that channel, that was really our approach. It was, could we cheaply create an audience, offer it free content, and see that engagement would increase over time? So as you can imagine, we had metrics like cost per engagement, engagement level, and progression through engagement stages. And one of the key things, and we had a prep session yesterday, and one of the key philosophies that I use for large ACV organizations like Caliber Mind is, don't get too caught up in the next several stages of metrics. Get yourself to a point that you're establishing those metrics early, and they quite often will tell you what the metrics need to be later on. And so, Ryan, I wanted to sort of take that back to you,
Yeah.
because you have to have a really, really different approach when you do these things. And that's because of the nature of Quota Path and their average deal size.
Yeah, exactly. So I do tend to look in a different way the next couple stages down the funnel. If you think about Quota Path and how we operate, we primarily operate in the upper SMB through the mid-market. So, and we're per user priced. And so from an ACV perspective and from a time to close, we're demoing to close new customers in 20 days. So for me, I pretty quickly do have to see if these impressions are turning into conversations, if those conversations are turning into opportunities, if those opportunities are turning into closed won revenue, because our sales cycle is so much tighter and shorter. And this specifically falls through in the concept of like a free trial that we offer too, right? So you can trial Quota Path for 14 days for free, build your own comp plans, learn how to use the product. It's what our buyer wants, but I have to have a really tight response time. And I'm talking to a lot of customers of ours who do operate at higher ACVs, who are in more upper mid-market through enterprise. They're also trying to test this, secondary motion of a free trial. They're trying to test the secondary motion of a commercial segment, right? That kind of a little bit more down market. And so a lot of the advice that I have for them is understand in or out pretty quickly if this channel is even mathematically viable, right? And I think a lot of people try to figure out what's the payback of this channel going to be, and how do I know that as fast as possible? The truth is, your payback takes so much time to evaluate, from first ad impression all the way through 2-3 year renewal. What you want to do is pressure test, hey, am I driving even enough engagement at the top of the funnel that in the best case scenarios of what I've seen historically, this could prove to be a channel that pays back for us or not?
And that's a gosh, in my experience, that's the norm. So it feels like even with the big ACV or the low ACV, longer sales cycles, slower sales cycles, it feels like that dynamic is the same. So to go back to Eric's sort of original question, like what are the sort of dyed in wool? I'm curious if there's commonality here in terms of what are the sort of the dyed in the wool early indicators of success versus failure. And one of the things I talked about was sort of cost, right? Especially at the top of the funnel.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, and this is a mistake I see a lot of marketers making, and it just is what it is. We have to go through this, which is they expect a top of funnel channel to produce middle or bottom of funnel metrics. So I'm curious, how did that cost component play for you with community activation? By the way, I love community-based channels that can be really scalable, low cost, high ROI.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what was that cost component for you?
So the way that we think about, I mean, there's so much of this whole dark funnel concept with community because there's so much view through and what have you. So the way that I tend to think about it is a cost per direct MQL. And then in the direct channel, what would then be the opportunity creation rate, the cost per opportunity, the win rate, cost per customer, and then all things payback is like how I think about it. And then I then make a separate assumption, which is of my direct traffic or paid search or other ways in which people are coming through the front door that are probably community influenced. What multiplier am I giving on top of that, like direct the community led base? So let's say community-led base is creating 100 conversations a month, 100 compensation plan consultations for the team a month or something like that. Then how maybe 20% up, I'm giving like 20% uplift credit as a function of like other sources in which people are coming to our site. And then you can bring those together to say, this is my cost per op, this is my cost per MQL, my cost per op, my cost per new customer, and then with some net revenue retention expectation or LTV expectation, this is the rough payback of the channel that I would expect.
Eric, that's really interesting. It's a to a degree what I think Ryan is talking about, and I love the by the way of using direct as the anchor. I think that's really smart, right? Um, what he's talking about is what you and I wrestled with sort of early in the year, which is channel elasticity. Sort of cause and effect, and then you've got the other component, the other vector, which is cost, right? So you quite often have your highest ROI channels have the lowest elasticity, right? And then the opposite as you go through. I'm curious for you. I'm sort of turning things back to you, Eric, here. But what is it like on the other side, which is the CEO side, right?
Yeah.
Because you're the one signing checks, you're the one saying yes to the budget. What is it like from your side to sort of wait out channel activation? Because I can imagine it's pretty stressful to hear from guys like Ryan and I, like, yes, we're doing fine, heuristics are good, but what's it like for you on the other side?
The challenge from this, from my perspective, is do the early metrics actually translate into results at the end? Because often what you do is like, hey man, these metrics are going great. Everything's moving in the right direction. Everything's moving in the right direction. Huh, we didn't get the pipeline we wanted. And so I feel like you kind of like everybody's very positive on what the metrics are saying up until they stop. They don't actually deliver the one metric that we care about, which is revenue. Like at the end of the day, we got all these metrics, but there's only one that really matters, really two. I mean, cost and revenue, how much did it cost me? What's my margin, stuff like that. So I'm trying to measure, like, am I hearing, are there a lot of happy ears? Are these metric, like the fact that these metrics are doing this, do they need to be doing this? Right? Like, I don't know really what the slope is that really results in something downstream. Right. And what I'm realizing is that the further up the funnel you are, the more that line needs to be like this, so that at the end I get a positive line down here. Right. And so it's hard. And then what I often see is this is a question I have for you guys, is the metrics often change per channel. And so it's very hard to step back from that and look across these different channels, which are running these different metrics, and compare them. How are they really working? You got a digital channel versus events, right? And the metrics are how many people showed up at the booth versus how many people clicked on my webpage. How do you compare that and make a judgment here at the top that I want to put more money here or here until you've seen results? And the results can be, Ryan, in your business, your time to result is pretty quick.
Yep.
Right? Ours can be, 6 to 8 months.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And so you're making these big bets up here, hoping that at the end of that cycle, you've got something. And so the larger, the nice thing is the larger the ACV of a product, the more you're making when these things happen, but also it extends out it extends out your time frames, your sales cycle. And that makes it harder to make a good judgment of what's happening up here because the cycle time is so much longer.
And I think one of the things, it's a really good point. And what we try to do is simplify there's basically opportunity creation, right? Which is the same across any of these types of things, right? An opportunity created from an event versus paid search versus what have you. We try to layer in one above that, right? That
Mhm.
like that's some sort of hand raiser. And then what's the expected hand raiser to op creation from a live event versus paid search traffic versus, and what do you
Yeah.
think those reasonably could be? Because to your point, you could talk to 100 people
Yeah.
at an event live.
Mhm.
We've had this experience ourselves. We've
Yeah.
talked to 100 people at an event live.
Yeah.
We booked a ton of demos uh,
Mhm.
that they're taking a demo. Really, what they're trying to do is just do a demo swap with you to
Mhm.
boost their pipeline numbers, and then your win rate is terrible down funnel, and then
Right,
the
right,
cost
right.
doesn't
Yep.
pay for itself.
Yep.
And so we've tried to normalize that as much as possible to then say, okay, we have this concept of like hand raiser, whether that's comp plan console, MQL, like kind of parallelize them
Yeah.
in turn, and then have that op creation rate be the next step, and then use your implied win rates there to understand your down funnel quality.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is really hard. There's a couple events we've heavily backed off of that used to be really great pipeline generating events for us
Mhm.
that we would go, we'd have a lot of conversations. It shifted into attendees just pitching their software and doing demo for demos and not being valuable for us.
Yeah.
And we just didn't get the down funnel results and
Yeah.
had to back off. So it's definitely a concern we've seen too.
Yeah. One thing I've seen is that you know, at the MQL level, or in our case MQA, marketing qualified account, they're not all created equal, right? And so depending on your channel, you know, the quality of that MQA could go up or down dramatically. And so the conversion rates are actually divided up. It could actually be very different by channel.
Yes.
But most organizations lump them all into one thing and look at a general conversion rate. And they don't really break down often the MQA conversion by channel, and then to some extent weight those MQLs, right? Basically, a great example is, you're doing events, and you do the event, and basically the attendee list gets uploaded as MQLs. It's an extreme example, but happens, right?
Yeah.
Everybody who touched your booth gets loaded uploaded as MQL. So, man, we did a great job at MQLs, MQAs this quarter, right? Yeah, but the conversion rate suddenly dropped because the reality was that those weren't really qualified, right? But it's the nature of that channel, which is like event based, right? And you can see like, or a webinar or something like that. And depending on how you convert the data for some of these channels in, your MQL quality can go up and down quite a bit, right? But if you could break it down by channel and say, okay, well, my average MQL conversion to SQL or SQA or something like that for this channel is X, but for this channel is much higher. That's when you start to get some metrics that really allow you to start to parse and weight and then predict how things are going to kind of proceed downstream.
It's a great point. And then the other one that I would add that people forget about is these channels also deliver very different quality of customer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even if your op conversion rate is, in line
Yeah.
and you have paid search and live events and paid social and what have you, we naturally find that the quality of the customer through something like paid search is much higher than some other channels because they had a high level of intent to buy. They
Yeah.
were looking for Googling commission tracking software. They pretty acutely know the problem and
Yeah.
pretty acutely know the solution that they're looking for.
Yeah.
Versus I can convince some people from a live event to try Quota Path and
Mm-hmm.
sign up. But if they're not bought into the ethos, even if they swiped a credit card, they may not churn. They'll likely churn at a higher rate in a year or two.
Yeah.
That's the
Interesting.
other piece of the funnel that I feel like people, if you're not looking at your payback curve and your LTV
Yeah.
CAC and like that view, you're just going to say, okay, we paid, $1,000 per new customer across all these different customers. That's great, pat on the back job
Yeah.
well done, which is
Right. Yeah, that's probably a little bit more endemic to as you go down to that SMB market. That as we go up, the qualification process is higher. But then we do see that we break our market into sort of kind of mid market to small to mid sized enterprise and enterprise up, right?
yeah.
And the reality is that sales cycles are very different between those two, but also the LTV on those two is actually also very different for us as an organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's not as many of these, right? So you got to be able to play in both, right? Because if you're always elephant hunting, you may have a great quarter and then an awful quarter, right? And it's very spiky. So you need to kind of balance that out.
Which is why we've used, so we have ICP markers in CRM, like very clear, like great fit customer on paper sort of thing. And that has proved helpful too, where you like, okay, at least if I know that the account, 30, 40, 50% of the accounts that I'm creating these opportunities are ICP.
Yeah.
If they win, I have to think they're going to be pretty decent customers.
Pretty good. Yeah. Yeah.
But if they're not, if I'm stretching into a new industry that I don't have a lot of experience in, okay, maybe those don't prove to be as great customers long term.
Yeah, that's funny. We do something. So we actually have a machine learning algorithm we train up that actually creates and ranks and stacks and creates the ICP and then puts it into 2 buckets for us from an ICP perspective. One last quick question to ask. So how do you square measuring channel performance for, because you guys have much more of a product-led growth type model than like an enterprise software package like us. How do you kind of square measuring channel performance for sort of like these PLG based motions where somebody comes in, signs up, boom, versus a kind of a traditional sales motion, especially when one sometimes becomes the top of funnel for the other?
Yeah, it's a great question. The way that I tend to think about it is in both motions, you have steps through the funnel and you have time ranges in which that step is deemed acceptable. Our mid-market, and we sell to companies with hundreds and thousands of reps. Like we do have a motion that is more mid-market up into enterprise. And so what I'm just widening my time horizons that I'm okay with those events happening. So, maybe in an event if I'm doing a live event that's very focused at the upper mid-market or enterprise, I will make that investment in that event. I'll go attend, we'll do a talk, we'll have some opportunities come out of it. We'll have some initial conversations. I give those versus 90 days, I give it 6 months to become like a true conversation, a true opportunity, and then I lengthen my close rate expectations from there. The nice part is in a lot of the enterprise motions, the nice and bad part is the cost is usually sunk up front, right? So as we start to have more of those mid-market conversations, you're paying in advance for attending an event and you have time before you can determine a year later if you're going to spend it.
Right.
So my SMB and mid-market motion is much more direct response. So I can turn the faucet on or off as needed for something like paid search or LinkedIn retargeting because I have that fast feedback loop. In the enterprise, I don't have as fast of a feedback loop, but that's fine because I'm making these bulk investments, once every 6 months.
Yeah, that's great. Doug, any thoughts on we kind of go to
no
tool time?
No additional thoughts. I just I appreciate Ryan being on the show today. I really do. Ryan, you and I have slightly different philosophies, but the core is the same, and it's so interesting to be able to spend time and understand that flow. I'm frankly going to steal a bunch of stuff from you and claim it as my own, Ryan. So there you go.
Welcome to working with Doug. All right, so we're going to quickly go into tool time. So today's going to be a little bit different. Ryan, you're going to actually review some of the key metrics and reporting that you use to kind of monitor how these channels are performing and all of that. So if you want to share your screen, I'll hand it over to you.
Let's do it. So I just picked a channel, one of our channels as an example of this. So this is some mode reporting that I have. It's a channel that we're working with. Actually, give me a second. Let me just do this instead.
And to set this straight, you're using sort of a marketing data warehouse based out of Snowflake, right? With sort of a BI tool layered on top, which is
exactly
awesome because a lot of our customers start there. And then as they start to scale their business, they realize that keeping the data in sync and kind of managing that becomes a difficult challenge for them, and they migrate to something like our product. But this is a great example of how you can take all that data, get it, from different data sources, get it into a central source, and then be able to monitor how your channels are performing.
Yeah, exactly. And this was, so premise here, before I joined Quota Path, we had no data infrastructure of any kind 2.5 years ago. So we were exporting reports directly from Salesforce and doing VLOOKUPs to build board reporting. This is a natural passion of mine. And so I partnered with the Mozart data team to like ETL a bunch of data from different sources into Snowflake, and then spun it up in Mode. For a business of our size, it just like this works, but there is a lot of building here, right? So our evolution will be for something more managed, but this is where we are for now. So channel that I picked. So what we do is we're looking at the funnel that we've talked about, right? So this is op creation, demo occur, qualified, closed won, the of a specific channel. This is the ARR that's moved through it. And this is how I'm monitoring the success of a channel versus expectation. So I have a channel, one of the community channels we've talked about here. This then has the op creation, what's been demoed, what's my qualified rate, what's my win rate of these in aggregate. So I can monitor how this channel, it's a channel we launched earlier this year that's grown well. I then have the ability to slice into some of my like progression rates. So what's my win rate of the channel? How am I winning? Is this within the range? Obviously super noisy with a new channel.
Yeah.
But am I winning as I'm expecting? Am I qualifying ops at the rate that I'm expecting? Do I have a no-show rate? So demo occurred of created. And then I can look at the revenue I'm bringing in from this channel and then all of the op level performance. And so what this doesn't have cost in here. So I then export this data to think about cost and then the cost layer and then the LTV side of the house separately. But what I'm trying to do here is say, am I creating enough ops at the top of the funnel that like within a period that seems reasonable? I was expecting to be 20 plus ops. So we've like hit that milestone. Are those demoing? Are those qualifying? Are those winning? Yes or no? And then from there, what are my costs from there on out to then model out what the payback is of this channel?
Yeah.
And so this becomes a really nice central way that I can slice this by a bunch of different channels for our business and monitor things like ASP of that channel. This is a slightly higher ASP channel for us, which is nice to see. And so there's just a lot of like good views here for me to like make the case to our CEO, hey, we should continue to invest in X, Y, and Z.
So to some extent, you're using, but like these different things are representing at some level like different stages inside of your opportunity, right? So it's a new op, now it's qualified, now they did a demo, boom, boom, boom. So you got your kind of different stages represented here. And then you can look at your conversion rates between these different stages, right? Like it goes from here to here. Where's the drop off? Some of that. That's great.
And where does that meet expectation, right? So on day one, I'm just looking at MQLs.
Yep.
And I'm trying to get enough MQLs to then say, will my MQL to demo, if my MQL to demo rate was 20% and my show rate was 85% and my win rate then once demoed was 35% and the ACV was 15K, which is the expectation. If all those things were to be true with what I have here in terms of MQL volume, would this be a viable channel for my business?
Right.
And if yes, that has earned me the right to then move to the next level. So I've gone from MQLs then into op creation. Am I creating enough ops?
Right. And then you can compare this back to your other channels that you're running at that stage, that early stage, and say, is it, am I getting to something comparable, right? Is it performing better or worse, at least at some level? And obviously you probably get a little bit of lift in that stage over time as you get better at it and stuff like that. But as long as it's hitting some threshold, you're willing to go, okay, now I'll keep going with this channel because now then I'll see at the next stage, how is it getting up to an acceptable level for this channel compared to my other channels?
Because you're down exactly. Your down funnel metrics on that channel are going to be bad at first.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to have people come in who are, you're in a community, for example, that's a community made of a lot of different people, some who may be a fit, some who may not be a fit, you don't know. So you probably have a lot of compensation plan consultations with people who have 2 reps or haven't hired their reps yet or haven't started, like they're not a viable customer for you. But then you learn and tweak your targeting to then say, okay, these are the people within the community I want to spend more time with. And here's how the operation could work from there.
Yeah, that's great. And then I also assume that per channel, you only have so much. Back to a conversation Doug, you and I have had a lot, is the elasticity. Like you RevOps co-op, you're only going to be able to get to a certain point there, right? And there's really you really can't spend more money so you got to go to another channel. But now it's an evaluation of this channel versus this channel. Where do I want to really go and invest the next set of time and energy? $.
And as those communities or what have you, just as an example, and we've loved our community partnerships, they're really great. As they say, hey, spend this much money to do X, to sponsor our conference that we're doing, to do the incremental stuff on top of the core channel.
Right.
I then have to pressure test, okay, is there enough of like an untapped TAM even in this community to like unlock what will happen? Do I expect a higher op creation rate? Do I expect a higher win rate in community or something like that?
Yeah. That's great. Good. Doug, any last thoughts before we kind of wrap up here today?
No, you nailed it. Everybody, thanks for being here.
Thanks. Okay, so Ryan, thanks so much for joining us today. This is fantastic. And it's great to kind of look at different businesses and how you're running kind of this versus us, especially since they're kind of, targeting different areas of the market. And to be honest, using very different channels that we use.
Of course.
So that wraps up this episode of Funnel Labs Friday. Next week, we're going to be joined by Tracy Earls of NetApp as we discuss the underlying formula for calculating marketing ROI. To be honest, don't miss NetApp. Tracy is someone I've known for years here at NetApp and is always a character, but is one of the most brilliant people I know, and just sort of really running sort of like marketing operations and how to drill into ROI and how to instrument it and do all of these things. So it's going to be a great session. Thanks so much. Cheers.
Thanks so much, team.